Hi, everyone. Welcome. My name is Sarah Sonaltendag, and I am the Senior Manager of Communications and Marketing here at Kids & Company. Thank you all for joining us for today's webinar. We would like to welcome Julia Swagan, the founder and director of Attunement Families. Attunement Families is a family and child therapy practice that's located in Toronto, offering virtual and in-person services. Their commitment is to help parents find peace with their families and connect and help their children thrive. So today, Julia will explore the benefits of family therapy and provides practical steps to give your child what they need most, a healthy relationship with you. We're so thrilled to have Julia join us today. If you have any questions throughout this session, please use the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen, and we will ensure that your questions will be addressed at the end of today's session. So Julia, it's over to you. Oh,
Thank you so much for the lovely introduction. I'm just going to go ahead and share my presentation. I also want to thank all of you for being here today. Really, it's so important that as parents, we continue our own learning and personal growth so that we can best support our children. And I really think that's such a gift, both to our own children, but also to the children that our kids will encounter throughout their lives. And so, I really see a movement happening among parents to really raise healthy, well-adjusted kids. And it makes me very hopeful for the next generation. So thank you so much to everyone for being here. Okay, so I'll get started. Today, I'll introduce myself first. So I'm Julia Swagan. I'm the founder and director of Attuned Families, a child and family therapy and parent coaching practice in the Junction neighborhood of Toronto, but we service families all over Ontario virtually, and we also provide in-person services. I've been working with children and families and schools for over 18 years. I've always worked with supporting children and families, and I've spent a lot of time in educational settings and consulting to schools. But above all, I am a human parent, a human and imperfect parent. I live with my husband and my 2 kids and our dog. And between them, at least one of them manages to humble me every day. So I'm not coming into this presentation, while I have a lot of knowledge and training and experience supporting families, I'm not coming to this presentation as someone who does it perfectly. I just try really hard and bring consciousness to it and really believe in the importance of how we raise our kids. So today we're going to talk about common challenges in parenting. I'll introduce you to the concept of family therapy and sort of the lens and approach that we bring to family therapy. We'll touch a little bit on attunement because we're attuned families, and the concept of attunement is really central to relationships. And we'll talk about how family therapy helps families. So just to start off, when you think of child development, a lot of us have sort of achievement and learning and our child's growth in mind. And sometimes we don't realize just how foundational relationships are. So if anyone wants to just type into the chat, like, what are your hopes for your child in life? That would be really helpful. And in the meantime, I just want to explain that learning and achievement actually happens on top of a foundation when we're talking about brain development, on top of a foundation that is built when attachment needs are met. And so by attachment needs, essentially, I mean the need for connection, the need to be seen and understood, and to be welcome in the presence of your caregivers. And so it's our relational needs that actually, as we meet relational needs, it builds the foundation on top of which all other brain development happens. So learning and achievement rest on a foundation of relational needs. Now, unmet attachment needs, and this is a lot of what I talk about, in a school context. Unmet attachment needs distract from learning and interfere with the cognitive processes associated with learning. So from a brain science perspective, we really need to be thinking about our children's relational and attachment needs. What children need most, and this is really a fundamental and basic human need, just like food and water, is to feel understood, accepted, cared for, and loved. And we call these needs attachment needs. Now, many families actually struggle to meet these needs, and that is because there are a lot of things that get in the way. We are really not set up for success in meeting all of our children's attachment needs, and that's why we see so many challenges in families today. So today we're going to talk a little bit about some of the things that get in the way and how family therapy can help. I'm just going to check in with the chat to see. Oh, but it's not popping up for me. Okay. 1 in 3 children, or sorry, 1 in 3 people are struggling with their mental health. That is quite a staggering statistic. And we were honestly in a mental health crisis before the pandemic, and we have seen that the pandemic has exacerbated mental health concerns. And we've seen, a number go from, depending on the study, 1 in 5 or 1 in 4 to 1 in 3. And re-entry into, or, the quote unquote return to normal, which I would argue there's no such thing, has actually heightened mental health concerns even more. And mental health is inextricably linked to relationships. And so if you think about 1 in 3 people suffering from mental health problems, that's going to be affecting a lot of families, right? And so if we have someone in a family who's struggling with their mental health, that's going to impact relationships. And when there's strain in relationships, and I can't stress how common it is for there to be strain in family relationships because families are under so much stress. But when there's strain in relationships, that affects family members' mental health. So treating, family therapy and addressing problematic patterns in relationships is actually a treatment for mental health concerns. Okay, so I'm going to talk about common challenges in families. And just raise your hand if you don't actually have to raise your hand, but if you have a strong inner critic. I work with a lot of parents who have a strong inner critic. And as I go over these common challenges, they may focus less on just how common these challenges are, how they're external to your own family, and how they're just challenges that we face in today's society. And they'll focus more on sort of noticing things that maybe I'm doing wrong as a parent. And it's really easy for us to go to a place of shame when we hear about, unhealthy relational patterns and see ourselves in those patterns. I would be quite surprised if no one watching this presentation can't see themselves in at least some of these challenges, because they're so commonplace. And the reason they're so commonplace is because we're not set up for success in managing healthy family relationships. So I just want you to see if you can let your inner critic take a backseat to this presentation. And we're all here to learn and grow and continue to make mistakes in our parenting and family journeys, but to bring a greater level of consciousness to our families and our parenting, and to just try and take one step in the right direction each day to improve relationships. So there's often when I work with families, a lot of the frustration in parenting comes from unrealistic expectations of our kids. So having developmentally appropriate expectations for your child can really help avoid frustration and hurt feelings from both parties. So it becomes a problem when there's a disconnect between what we expect of our child and what our child is delivering on. And usually if our child isn't delivering on an expectation, it's because they're actually not developmentally capable yet. So understanding where your child is at developmentally and what you can reasonably expect from them can really alleviate a lot of stress and frustration in parenting. And I'll give you an example. So I'm sure most of you can relate to an experience of telling your child, it's time to put your shoes on and go out the door. It's time to put your shoes on and go out the door. It's time, right? And you repeat yourself and repeat yourself until you're frustrated. And often the meaning that we make is our child's not listening to us. They're disobeying us. They are being defiant. They don't care. And usually what's really happening is that the child is paying attention to something else and actually doesn't have the level of cognitive development needed. So the part of their brain that allows them to attend to more than one thing at once, just that structure is not there yet. And so they're not registering what you're saying. And so they're focused on their Lego or whatever it is that they're doing. And you're saying it's time to put their shoes on, and they're not really registering that message because their brain is focused on something else. So when you understand that just developmentally they're not there, you can go over to them, get down to their level, share attention with them, focus on what they're focusing on for a moment, and then help them shift their attention towards what they need to be focusing on. Now, this is hard actually, because most families are running at such a pace that those extra few minutes to do that task often mean that you're going to be late. So planning around that can be really helpful. But also, even if it's just about taking out the meaning making of our child as being defiant, because that can cause such a disconnect in the relationship and lead to discipline. That's a further disconnect. So hopefully you can see that when we have reasonable expectations for our child's behavior, even though, it can be inconvenient still, it can really help with connection in families. We tend as a society to focus a lot on behavior. And the problem with focusing on behavior is that you miss the emotions and you miss the intentions. I'm going to tell you a story about that in just a minute. You turn golden opportunities to connect with your child into experiences of disconnection and often shame. And this undermines your relationship with your child. It actually undermines the very relationship that you need in order to foster good behavior. And it can impede a healthy emotional development in your child, which will also likely increase problem behavior. So it's really easy. There's a lot of pressure on us as parents to get our kids to behave in certain ways that they're often not developmentally ready for yet. And it can really get us into this cycle of focusing on behavior, creating disconnects, which increases behavior, and our response creates more disconnect. So it's actually quite easy for families to get into a really tough spot in their relational patterns when they're trying to address behaviors. Now, most kids, all kids, I would say, are well-intentioned and lack the skills to navigate the world successfully. So they're really trying their best, but they are working with a lot of immaturity and a really underdeveloped brain, especially most of you are probably parenting like quite little ones. And so I want to tell you a story just to illustrate how important it is to focus on our children's intentions instead of the behavior that we see. Because if we only focus on the behavior that we see, the meaning we make of it can be really off base. So when my older daughter was about 3, and my younger daughter was about a baby, like less than 1, I had them at the table and I was preparing them a snack. And I came over, so I was going back and forth between, we have sort of open concept, so going back and forth between the kitchen counter and the table, serving them a snack. And my older daughter was leaning across the table and taking the snack off of the baby's tray and putting the snack on her plate. Now, if I had just looked at the behavior, and again, I'm not perfect. I had a good day this day, and so I get to tell this success story. I've had a lot of missteps in my own parenting, but this was just a really good example of me taking my own advice. So the meaning that I would make of this behavior is my older daughter is stealing the baby's snacks. She's taking her snack away, and that's not nice, right? Instead of making meaning of the behavior, I asked my older daughter a simple question, which was, honey, what are you trying to do? And my older daughter said, Mommy, grapes are a choking hazard. I was serving them grapes. In my defense, the grapes were cut up, but my older daughter just had heard somewhere that grapes are a choking hazard, and she was trying to protect the baby and save her from choking. So what looked like bad behavior was actually just a small child trying to be really, really good and look after her little sister. So can you imagine the difference in that child's experience between a parent being able to say, oh, thank you for trying to protect your sister, and let me teach you that when the grapes are cut up, it's actually okay for the baby, but I really appreciate your help, versus stop taking your sister's food. That's hers, right? Just think about how misunderstood a little one could feel in that situation. Okay, so moving on to another really common challenge that happens in families. If I can, will we be able to use the chat a little bit for an activity here? I just want to get you to, I want to paint a picture for you. So you've had dinner. If you're in a 2-parent family, or assuming there are 2 family members, 2 adults present, one parent is getting the kids off to bed and the other one's going to clean up. And let's say mom's getting the kids off to bed, dad's downstairs cleaning up, and mom says to dad, can you please make sure to load the dishwasher? If you're dad, or if you're the parent who's been asked, please make sure to load the dishwasher, what is your immediate response? Is it something like, absolutely, I'll make sure to load the dishwasher? Or is it possible that it's something more like, yeah, when do I not load the dishwasher? And by the way, I still have to walk the dog, clear the dishes, do the laundry, right? So what kind of response would you get from your loved one, or would you have towards your loved one? For some reason, I'm not able to see the chat, but I'm wondering if there could be, can we dialogue about this a little bit? Because I do see that there is chat, but I just can't see it on my screen for some reason.
So far from Mary, she says, you load the dishwasher, LOL. Defensive from Danielle. Probably later from Alan.
Yeah.
Leah says, second one, I always load the dishwasher.
Yeah. Okay, so this is like a very, very typical pattern that happens in families, which is called the criticism defense cycle. So even if there was no criticism intended in, can you please load the dishwasher? If criticism is perceived, the defenses go up. And this is a really, really easy way for family members to get into arguments and fights. And criticism causes feelings of hurt and rejection, and it triggers our defenses. But often our defenses come in the form of, are received as criticism as well. So you just kind of go back and forth, like, you do this and you do that, and I do this, this, and this. And I see this a lot around household tasks, because honestly, there's too much to go around. We were meant to have a village supporting us in raising families. And most of us are sort of in 1 or 2 parent households with young children and not a lot of support. And even when there is support, it often feels like it's not enough. And so this is another common thing that we see and that we help with therapy. So this can get people into power struggles. It can get people into more rigid thinking, and it can really get into a problematic cycle that can be hard to break. Another common challenge for families is difficulty with co-regulation. So when our child, say your child is having a tantrum or is really, really upset, the ideal is for us to be able to like meet them where they're at, validate their feelings, and help them come down to calm, right? Or if they're having trouble getting going, it's to come down here and meet them where they're at and bring them up to functioning. Okay, so it's not that we want to sort of squash the feelings or the tantrum. We want to weather the storm when there's a tantrum without doing any harm. But often parents get triggered and get dysregulated by their kids' dysregulation, and we can't give what we don't have. So many parents have trouble regulating their own emotions, and many of us were not raised in households where emotions were handled in a healthy way. And so it's really hard to give what you didn't get. So often we see families, and emotions are contagious too, right? And so often we see challenges in parents just finding their own calm and not getting really reactive to their children's emotions. But the problem with that is that the way that we build, oh, I'm sorry, just one second. Sorry about that. The way that we build emotional intelligence in kids and the way that kids learn to regulate their own emotions, which makes them so much easier to parent later on and makes life easier for them, is with that co-regulation. So this is a really, really important sticking point in parenting often, and another thing that we help to support parents with. So how you feel about feelings really impacts the climate in your household and your ability to co-regulate. So if you grew up in a household with anger and anger feels scary for you, then if your child's angry, it's going to be really hard for you to cope with that. And so in a perfect world, some healing can happen there. And what the ultimate goal is, and again, this is not about perfection. It's always a work in progress, in my opinion. I think parenting is about personal growth, and that's a lifelong process, right? But the more you can move towards accepting feelings, the healthier on an emotional level your family will be. Okay, so I'm going to introduce you to the concept of family therapy. So a lot of people think family therapy is good for early intervention and prevention, and it's also good for addressing concerns. And it's a little bit hard to explain what it is because it is so complex, but it's a complex process, an experiential process that improves relational patterns. It can increase insights into those patterns and other family members' experiences. And the experiential process is facilitated between family members, helps you to get each other, heal hurts that have happened in the family or in people's pasts, and connect with one another on a deeper level. So family counseling helps every family member feel seen and valued, and your family's unique goals and needs are at the center of our process. Now, it can sometimes feel in those moments where things are not going well, like your family needs a big overhaul and a huge intervention. And actually what the research tells us, or it can feel like just overwhelming and impossible to create the kinds of changes that you need in your family. But what the research tells us is actually that small changes made in relational patterns can have a big impact. Because if you think of the many years long trajectory of child development, let's say your child is 4 right now, and you make a small change. That small change is going to be a step in a different direction. And if you keep taking one step after another in a different direction, you end up so far away from where you would have ended up if you didn't make any changes. So it's actually, we say small changes for big impact. So exactly how family therapy works depends on the unique needs of each family. At Attuned Families, we use different types of family therapy. They're all evidence-based methods, and our founding principles are all on working on relationship and attachment needs. So we're really about getting to the root and providing deeper healing than sort of focusing on, you know, direct problem solution, just do this differently or do that differently. Behavior change is important, but what we find is when we facilitate a more emotional and relational process, the change happens in a less direct way that feels a bit more seamless and has a deeper impact. Now, just as a note, the type of family therapy we do doesn't always mean that we have everyone in the same room together. Sometimes we'll be working with one parent or both parents or a child. The reason it's family therapy is because the whole family is the client. But we can actually create change in families through working with one family member or all family members. It just depends on the needs of the family. Now, the other thing is that sometimes it's hard to figure out exactly what the problem is. Sometimes it's more of a feeling, and sometimes it's more of, you know, you don't know exactly where things are going wrong or where people aren't connecting, but there's just something that's not going well. You don't know what needs to change. And family therapy can really help make sense of the patterns that you're seeing, and we can pinpoint where best to spend your energy trying to create change, if that makes sense. So because we're attuned families, I have to talk about attunement. So attunement is really, I say, a game changer in parenting and relationships. Attunement is what's at the heart of connection. So it's really about getting your child or getting your partner or the person you're in a relationship. And every child really needs and deserves to be gotten and to have that feeling of like, you get me. They need to feel understood. They need us to see them at their core. And just like the story with the grapes, to understand them. And when they make mistakes or they behave in ways that aren't, you know, pro-social, or that behaviors that we don't want to see, that we can really hold who they are at their core in the context of those mistakes, and not sort of really shame and blame them. And so when you can hold on to their good intentions and see their missteps in that context, you can respond to them a lot more effectively and in a way that feels better for everyone. So this is just an image of a moment of attunement. Now, don't get me wrong. My expectation is never that a family is going to spend all of their time in perfect attunement and connection. That's not at all what I'm saying. We strive for moments of this, and those moments, if we can have regular moments of really mirroring what our child is feeling really in sync together, feeling understood together, those moments of connection can carry you through so many challenges, and they build up within your child to make them more resilient and help with all of the brain development that we're hoping to support for them. So as I said, family therapy facilitates a relational experience that supports this process of attunement and healthy attachment relationships between family members. And we have attachment relationships in our marital or intimate partnership relationship, and we have attachment relationships with our kids. And what we really strive for is to have those attachment needs being met in all of the family members as much as possible. So Dan Siegel, who's a very influential and brilliant professional in the field, says, when we attune with others, we allow our own internal state to shift, to come to resonate with the inner world of another. So I want to leave you with our acronym. And this is sort of what we leave families with, because we find that this work that we do as parents and families to really create healthy relationships really requires us to keep sort of going back to this mindset, continuing to learn and remember what our priorities need to be, because it's very easy to fall into old patterns. And so we have like little magnets and bookmarks that we give out just as like a keepsake and a reminder to acknowledge emotions, tolerate discomfort because change can be uncomfortable. Trust in the process because it is a process. This doesn't happen overnight, but small changes for big impact. Understand their experience. So really trying to put yourself in their shoes, if you will. Nurture your relationships and empathize with your loved ones. Now, there was I'm just going to speak a little bit to the benefits of family therapy. And then we can get to questions if that's okay. So I think some of the benefits to family therapy are obvious. It supports healthy relationships. We talked about how important healthy relationships are to overall child development. So it's really important for our kids. But also, really interesting fact, there's some really, really good solid science. And I won't go into all the details of it, but that healthy relationships actually improve your immune system. They're actually able to predict in Dr. John Gottman's relationship lab with up to 90%, over 90% accuracy, how many infectious illnesses a family member will have in the coming 6 months based on the relational patterns in a family. And so this is really like, we really can't separate our relationships from our overall health and well-being and functioning. So I would be happy to take questions if now would be a good time for that.
Absolutely. We just want to thank you, Julia, because this has been so informative and helpful. And, you've provided such great insight for us as parents to find peace and connection with our kids. So let's go right into the Q&A right now. So for Jeffrey, he says, would it still be considered family therapy if two parents are separated? And is this recommended for co-parenting as well?
Yes. So absolutely, you can still do family therapy. If it's a high conflict separation, then it's a different kind of work. But in more amicable separations, you can absolutely still do family therapy. And in fact, there can be concerns about the effects of divorce and separation on children, and the type of family therapy that we do has been shown by research to mitigate the effects of the possible negative effects of divorce on children, even if only one parent is engaging in the process.
Okay, now Sia has asked, are your services available virtually still, or are they all in person?
We do a hybrid now. So what we do is some people really want to be seen in person, so they're seen in person. Some people virtually works better, and that's available. And then in some cases, we do a hybrid of both. So some sessions in person and then check-ins virtually, so that you kind of get the best of both worlds. It's a very flexible model.
Now, another question is, how is attunement different from attachment?
Oh, good. Yeah, good question. So attachment is the relationship. Attunement is sort of the process that is at the heart of attachment. So good attunement supports good attachment. If that makes sense. So attunement is like the tuning in, but attachment is about more than attunement. Attachment is about you being tuned in and also you being responsive to the needs. And also sort of there's like creating an environment where your child feels welcome in your presence. Now, of course, we all want alone time sometimes, and that's okay. But in general, a child feeling really loved and cared for and accepted is also part of it. So attunement is sort of like a really pivotal process in building healthy attachment relationships.
Another person says, I would love to share this with my husband. When will we receive this recording? So you're going to actually receive this recording in the next 2 days. Kids and Company will send out an email and you'll receive all the materials. Another question is, what do you suggest for high conflict co-parenting situations? And any recommendations if only one parent is more on board with therapy?
Yeah, so I mean, it's so tough with high conflict situations. I mean, there's a lot of good research to support the effectiveness of mediation versus court, if you can both agree to that process. But either way, as I said, even if only one parent is willing to engage in therapy, then the kids still benefit. Like one parent's work on parenting can mitigate the negative effects for the kids, even if both parents aren't on board. And usually in a high conflict situation, we would suggest working with a parent or parents only until some of the legal stuff is resolved, so that the kids don't sort of get pulled into the conflict any further.
Would this work for a family where we have an 18-year and a 20-year-old with mom?
Yes. So this works. You could, the type of therapy that we do and the relational skills that you learn and abilities that you develop work in any relationship. So these skills are great for like educators with kids they're working with, but we'll find that we go in and train educators, and they'll come up and say, I'm using this on my husband, or I'm using this on my grown kids. It's absolutely never too late to work on your relationships. And the skills needed, while the way that you relate to an 18-month-old is very different from how you relate to an 18-year-old, the concepts still work at any age.
Now, is there any advantage for a family to attend family therapy, even if there is no conflict currently happening?
Yes. And honestly, I love it when that happens, because even when there isn't conflict, when we can boost those relationships, we're boosting immunity, we're boosting the resilience. And an absence of conflict isn't always a sign that everything is great. So problems in families don't always look like conflict, right? And so I think that if there's a part of you that's thinking that this could be beneficial, then absolutely. I think that if you're attending therapy sessions and feeling like you'll know in session if it's helpful or not, right? And so yeah, I mean, and in fairness, I'm a family therapist, and I think family therapy, I see the transformations that happen, and I do a lot of the activities in my own family just for maintenance. So I do have a bias there I want to acknowledge, but yeah, I think it's absolutely wonderful for any family who can make the space for it.
And another question is, what are some easy tools for adults and children that we can access to help with self-regulation?
So, okay. Yeah. So self-regulation, for what I tell parents, is more about what you do every day than what you do in the moment. So it's really hard if you are looking for like, okay, what do I do when? If the only times that you're trying to work on self-regulation are when you're dysregulated, it's not going to be very effective. Because I'm just going to do, Dan Siegel also created this thing called the hand-brain model. So if you think of my wrist as the brainstem, my fingers as the part of your brain that have logic and reasoning, and my thumb as the reactive part of your brain, like the fight, flight, freeze, where there's no logic or reasoning, it's just reaction. When you get dysregulated, you flip your lid. This is true for kids, but it's also true for adults. And so when you're upset, this rational, logical part of your brain is completely offline. So when we try to talk to a child about how to calm down when they're upset, they're not hearing us and they're not able to access those skills. And so if the only time you're thinking about how do I regulate is when you're like this, it's impossible because all of the learning happens up here. But the things that you can do every day to help keep your lid down or develop the pathways that help you get it down more easily are things like mindfulness, like 5 minutes of mindfulness a day, eating well, exercising. Also, having healthy relationships is a big part of it, because then you can depend on one another to co-regulate more. And your lid is less flippy when you are in this place of feeling attuned to your kid and not having all of these sort of misunderstandings, if you will. Getting good sleep is really important. So all of these like healthy habits that you do daily or weekly are what prevent you from really going off the rails. And then also therapy is a really good, even if it's individual therapy, is a really good way of increasing your ability to self-regulate, because you develop the ability to self-regulate through co-regulation, just like your kids do. And so some of us didn't have that growing up. And so part of the process of therapy is kind of like reparenting you and helping you process those old hurts, reduce triggers. And so it's less about tips and tricks than good habits and healing, I would say.
Thank you for that. Now we have 2 more questions, but if anyone else has any questions, please feel free to write them in the chat box, just because we still have about 15 more minutes. But if you don't, then we can always end today's session a little sooner. So the next question is, what does 5 minutes of mindfulness mean?
Oh, well, honestly, it can be as easy as going on YouTube and Googling mindfulness meditation. And there are like these pre-recorded, it's like a guided meditation essentially. So you sit with your feet on the floor, your attention is drawn to your breath, feeling where your weight is resting and tuning into your body. And then sometimes there's a bit about refocusing. So if your mind starts to wander, no judgment, just notice it and bring it back and focus on your breathing. So it's really about creating headspace and bringing calm to the system. We spend so much time in our heads and so much time running around. It's getting that attention back and creating sort of that white space. Okay. There are also some good apps that you can try or purchase for mindfulness.
Do you know one off the top of your head that you could suggest, Julia?
Yeah, I think the biggest 2 are Headspace and what's the other one? Well, Headspace is the one that comes to my mind. I have no affiliation with them or anything like that. They're just quite well known. And there's
just said Calm as well too.
And the Calm, that's the other big one. Yes, thank you. There's also I don't know if it's still up, but on YouTube, there was a series, on Netflix, there was a series. I think it was a Headspace series. Either the Calm or Headspace made like a series to educate people and introduce you to mindfulness. So that could be a neat thing to check out.
What also about kids apps? Like which ones could we like recommend for children?
Both, I believe both the Calm and Headspace have kids exercises in them so that you can just share the app with your kids too.
Fantastic. Okay, so we have 3 more questions here that popped up. How do we know if we need individual therapy or family therapy to help with regulating emotions?
So, I mean, family therapy can include individual sessions. So, I mean, either can help. The best way to know is to sort of do an initial assessment and work with a therapist who can hear sort of more about your situation, ask you strategic questions to determine like what the best course of action is.
Okay, so 2 questions about cost. So is it standard or based on family needs?
The cost? Yeah,
Yes.
the cost is based on just time. And so our rates consider basically all of the work that we do outside of session on training, professional development, teamwork, et cetera, et cetera. Most of our therapists work part-time with us and then part-time at an organization. And sorry, you said, is it based on family needs or?
Yeah, I think it's just, is it like a standard flat rate cost, or is it based on the family needs in terms of the pricing? Like, yeah, that's, yeah.
So we offer a standard range. So we do offer what's called a sliding scale. So if families are really in need of support and our rates are prohibitive, we will sometimes offer a sliding scale. Our services are eligible under most extended benefits plans for coverage. So what happens is we bill clients and then clients submit the receipt, just like if you went for a massage to your extended benefits, and you get reimbursed by your benefits. So if you're lucky enough to have a good benefits package, then it should be at very little cost to you.
Okay, well, you know what, Julia, that was all the questions we have. So thank you so much. It was a wonderful presentation, and thanks for sharing your insight on the benefits of family therapy and how we can help our children thrive. Really appreciated your knowledge today and the services that Attune Families has to offer us. So thanks again. And we'd like to remind all participants that there will be a recording that's following up after today's session with other materials from Attune Families. So stay tuned for that, as well as a survey that will pop up at the end before the end of today's session. So thank you everyone for attending, and we hope that you have a wonderful day. Take care, everyone. Oh, yeah, sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to share, there was a question that came up about sharing with their spouse. We do have in-person parenting workshops scheduled throughout the year. That might be a nice intro to some of the skills that we've talked about. And we run a parenting group, which is also more cost effective and comes with the whole curriculum around your child's developmental needs and the skills that you want to be building in a supportive space. So that's an option as well.
And you know, this is fantastic. I honestly love when this happens in webinars. So someone just said they registered for one of your sessions.
Oh, funny.
Another one, yeah, is saying that, is there any podcast or book recommendations on the topic or other resources in general before we head out here?
Yeah. So, I mean, there's a book called Rest, Play, Grow that I really love. Because it really gets into that piece around our expectations of children and what they're developmentally capable of and what those basic needs are. We also have a lot of digital materials available that you can access by contacting us. Some of them are only available if you're in the parenting group. We're starting up a new parenting group in the new year. So if that's something that interests you, to be able to consume and learn along the way, but then also have a place to come and troubleshoot and get support, that might be something that would interest you.
Wonderful. Okay, so once again, everyone, thank you so much for joining today's session. You can find Julia online at attunefamilies.com. And you know, we will hopefully have Julia join us again in the coming months. So thanks again, and watch out for the recording and all the materials that will be heading your way. Take care, everyone.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Julia. Take care. Bye-bye.